Hello, basketball fans! DC Hewitt here for the Fantasy Basketball Analyzer, and I'm here to help you get ready for Week 16 of the NBA season. We've only got one team with 2 games. Everybody else plays 4 or 3, so weekly lock leagues don't have to worry too much. But half the teams are playing 4 games, so if you're at a 3 game, you are at a disadvantage. But before we dive right into the schedule, let's take a break for beer. This week I'm going with the Overnight Sensation. It's a raspberry ale. The reason I went with the Overnight Sensation for this episode is last time I did it, I threw out some names for Zion and asked for some names from people for beers that maybe could be Zion's nickname. We didn't get any suggestions yet, so the Overnight Sensation seems fitting for now. Well, it's a little nondescript. So I'm drinking the Overnight Sensation Raspberry Ale by Griffin Claw to help us get ready for Week 16, and then once we've got some more involvement or some knockdown names for Zion, we'll cycle on back to that. All right, let's bring up the schedule and take a look. So the only team with 2 games is Chicago. So I think Chicago, you got to sit them all. I don't want to rattle off a bunch of names because you can see them here, but I guess the 3 gamers, because there's only 14 of them, is Brooklyn, Charlotte, Cleveland, Denver, Golden State, Lakers, Milwaukee, Minnesota, New Orleans, OKC, Sacramento, Toronto, Utah, Washington. Couldn't quite get it in one breath. All right. So that's the look. I think Chicago is just non-playable. Maybe you got to play Zach LaVine, but honestly, it's 2 games. I wouldn't do it. I think you probably got a better option. Chicago gets to play New Orleans, which you like that matchup, but then they play Philly, and you don't love that matchup. So with 2 games, I think you rest everyone. In fact, before we go into the full schedule for this week, since we're speaking on Chicago, I want to bring this up. Let's take a look at the remaining games for the entire season. If we go ahead and look, Chicago's got a 2-game week right now. They only get 1 game next week. You get a 3, and then you get another 2. So Yahoo's playoffs can start as early as week 20. Most don't. You'd have to be in a custom league that changed something to be starting all the way in week 20. But you could. If that's the case, that means the Bulls only have 1 playable week. You know, they've got 2 games now and then 2 games on the 19th. So if you have any Bulls, not that they're headliners, except maybe Zach LaVine, that'd be great. If you can flip Zach LaVine, trade him away right now. If you've got anyone else that you can throw in as ancillary pieces, Chris Dunn you're holding on to because of his steals or something like that. If you got Thad Young and you can convince someone about the upside he's getting or any of that, I would push him off. Even if you go ahead and look at the end of the schedule. So a championship level fantasy team trying to trade now for the playoffs. Maybe you're thinking Wendell Carter will be back. Maybe Lauri Markkanen will be back. I want to go get those guys. The Bulls don't have a great playoff schedule. We get into weeks 22, which I believe is the ESPN start, or 23, which is the Yahoo start. 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, and then 2 in the last week, which no one should be playing in those final weeks. But the Bulls just have a really weak schedule coming up. They're the only team that is bad now and subpar for all of the playoffs. So if you have any Bulls, like I said, Zach LaVine could headline. Everyone else is maybe an ancillary piece. Someone you can throw in to get a deal done for something bigger where you're doing a 2-for-1 deal or something like that. Now's the time to do it. Let's hope they don't notice. You got a down week. It gives you the excuse of I'm selling a little low, and let's not bring up the fact that you're really just trying to get out while the getting is good. All right, let's switch over from that kind of talk. Maybe that should be a whole different topic to get us ready for the playoffs. But let's jump over and look at this week's matchups. We'll take a look at our pace of play and the defense. Anyone who doesn't know, these are Hollinger's per numbers. So bring up the pace because the faster you are, the more possessions you get. And the defensive efficiency because obviously the better defense, the chance that you score less on offense. So I take those 2 and average them out, and it's the usual suspects up top. Washington, Atlanta, New Orleans, Cleveland, Memphis that you want to attack. And then Houston, Portland, Minnesota, Golden State are all close. Those are also teams, especially for DFS, that give you some really good upside that you want to attack. And so those guys are also there in that 106 range, but not quite in the elite attacks as 109, 108, 107, which you can see. Down at the bottom, usual suspects again. Toronto, Philly, Orlando, Boston. I included Indiana and Denver because they have very slow pace of play. Speaking of Indiana, Oladipo came back this week, which was nice to see him. He didn't play a ton of minutes in this matchups, and he looked pretty rusty, but he looked healthy. right? Like, I'll take healthy over rusty. I wasn't sure about coming back from the injury. I've been getting a lot of questions as early as November, people saying, should I trade for Oladipo? I hope you guys took my advice and waited. If you got him now, cool. If not, if he's playing those minimum games, it's not a huge deal, but maybe that's something you look at. In fact, let me take a look here. Indiana's got an all right playoff schedule. So maybe while he's still playing this low thing, you can try and like wheel and deal of saying, yeah, you know, I've got a couple guys. We don't know how much Oladipo is going to be back. Maybe not. It's up to you what you got, what you're looking for. But I'm glad to see him back. Glad to see him healthy. And without getting too much into the other specifics, let's go ahead and look at the strength of schedule grid for our teams to get some matchups. So here we've got everything we need to know. See, 4 games, 2 games, 3 games. That important high-level stuff, and then also the matchups we want to do. A couple kind of fun anomalies, home and aways we got going on. If you look right at the top of the sheet, Atlanta and Boston play each other twice. They each get a home game there, which means it's a good week for Boston and not a great week for Atlanta. Boston's got Orlando, which you don't love, and OKC in there, and Atlanta gets Minnesota and the Knicks, which are actually positive matchups. So, neither's a stay away, and most importantly, they both get 4 games, so I think you roll those guys out there. But it's something to kind of look at those matchups. It's also fun for DFS when you get this type of thing. If you're playing daily fantasy or just a daily change league, and you get to see how Atlanta fares against Boston, presumably Boston's bigs are going to tear apart Atlanta down low, and Trae Young does his thing all the time, so you're going to play him against Atlanta, or you're going to play him against Boston anyway, no matter who Atlanta's facing, and I wouldn't worry too much about it. Along the same lines, we got another home and away, just to call out. Indiana plays Toronto, so both of those teams are in our bottom. Toronto's the very least desirable matchup, and Indiana's down there in the bottom 5. They play each other twice, so they have a home and away. Toronto only plays 3 games, so it's Indiana, Brooklyn. I think you still roll out Pascal and stuff like that, but maybe you like OG Anunoby, he's got to go to the bench, I think. It's got 3 games. Neither of the Indiana matchups are great. Brooklyn's good, but you probably have someone on your roster that is like equal to OG. Of course, when I say this, it depends on your bench. Depends on if it's a weekly locks league or daily change. But you don't expect necessarily the explosion games against Indy, who plays 2 bigs. Before Indy, they play Toronto twice. They also get to play Dallas and the Pelicans. So Dallas is about a neutral matchup, although Luka's out, but we don't really worry about Luka for defense. If anything, he pushes the ball well on offense. And New Orleans, we're happy with that matchup, so you still roll them out there. I mean, anyone with 4 games this week that you normally play, you definitely play now. Especially this week, because a lot of fantasy players are fantasy football. A lot of fantasy basketball players also play fantasy football, or at least are sports fans in general, and will probably be watching the Super Bowl tonight, which means this week, higher than most, is a week where people kind of forget to set their lineups. So you want to grab, you always want any edge you can, but this week in particular, if you can get a couple extra games edged in there over your opponent, then you're going to have that much better chance to bring home the win in all your head-to-head matchups. All right, if you want to look at these matchups now and the strength of schedule, pause it right now, and then I'm going to flip over to the back-to-back video. So you pause the video, or you can click the link below and bring that up. Let's go ahead and look at the back-to-backs. The back-to-backs, the Clippers do have a back-to-back at the end of the week. So while they have 4 games, they play Minnesota and Cleveland Saturday and Sunday. Now, you like both those matchups, so you would love it if they play both, but you don't expect Kawhi to play both of them. So there you go. You got to count Clippers as having a 3-game week if you're talking about Kawhi. A couple other teams playing the late in the week back-to-back games. If you're in a daily change league and you're picking guys up to try and stream, or you're trying to limit your moves, New York gets played Detroit and Atlanta. You like both those matchups, and New York, because they're not very good, have a lot of people on the waiver wire that you go ahead and pick up. So take a look. There are some of the New York options. Also, Atlanta, Memphis, and Utah all play Sunday and then again on Monday. They have the back-to-back that rolls into next week. So you can, if you aren't making a ton of moves this week, then you can use one of those, moves now to set you up for next week to try and get those extra games in there. So take a look at those guys. I tagged them all. They have a little asterisk if they're rolling into a back-to-back coming into next week that we haven't seen. All right, so that's all I've got for the normal schedule stuff. But let's go ahead and talk about waivers. Last week I didn't end up getting my waiver show out. Unfortunately, the NBA world at least, lost Kobe. And with that kind of the tragedy going on, I just didn't really feel like hopping in and putting out a waiver video. It was just the NBA world was doing something else, and so I didn't get to it. But so right now, let's bring back up the strength of schedule, because that's really what I'm using to help me find, I'm using that and Yahoo ownership levels to help me find some people to pick up and play this week. So if we go here and take a look at a couple of the teams I think have favorable matchups. So Dallas, they play Indy, you don't love, but Memphis and Washington you're excited about. Charlotte plays a little slower, in fact, the slowest, I believe, but you're not afraid of their defense. Luka's out, and I just got the alert on my phone while we're recording this that Seth Curry's already been ruled out for Monday. So they're down 2 guards, which means Jalen Brunson is a great pickup for this week. He's barely owned. Last time Luka missed 4 games with his injury, Jalen averaged almost 14 points, 9.5 assists, and almost 5 rebounds. Last night, Jalen just got a season-high 27 points. So Jalen's available on your waiver wire. Go ahead and scoop him up. Other Dallas guards, Tim Hardaway Jr. is worth a look. Sorry, that is Junior, right? Yeah, I didn't just make that up. Tim Hardaway Jr. is available, and DeLon Wright's not even owned in 50% of leagues. So there's some guys that you pick up that are going to get some extra minutes as long as Luka's going to be out. Luka said it, if he's going to miss 4 games, 6 games, we're not exactly sure. So it might not be great for all week, but I think there's some value there. If you're playing in a deeper lineup, they're probably available on your waiver wire. Along those lines, guys that are available, Nerlens Noel, he only plays 3 games this week, and he was probably a bit better last week because Steven Adams was still out. Steven Adams is coming back, but Nerlens was only playing 22 minutes a game even when Steven Adams was out. There's really no reason he couldn't keep playing 22 minutes a game. If you combine his blocks and steals, he's been averaging 3 combined blocks and steals distributed a little differently. So you can really get that defensive specialist and plug him in there, and he's not going to hurt you with field goal percentage or free throw percentage because he's up above like 75 in both of them. So it's nice because you can plug him in. He doesn't hurt anything and gives you that special defensive nod. Now he's only got 3 games, so it's not going to be tons of blocks and steals. Maybe that's better for you if you're playing in a daily change league where you can plug him in there a little easier and you're not like giving so much up. But they're going against Cleveland, Detroit, Boston. Other than Boston, you're pretty happy with those matchups, and there's a good chance he can do pretty well. If we're talking about defensive specialists, like while I'm on the topic, Matisse Thybulle for Philly. Now Philly gets 4 games, and it's a pretty good week. Miami you don't love. Milwaukee's got a fast pace despite having great defense. Memphis, you love that matchup, and Chicago's a walking wounded with all their bigs hurt. So you play Matisse Thybulle. Now he doesn't have the safety in the percentages like I was just talking about with Nerlens Noel. He might actually hurt you there, but he's a low usage, so he shouldn't really swing it. It's not like Harden or someone in your schedule, but over the last 6 games, so about the last 2 weeks, give or take, he's been averaging over 2.5 steals and over a block and a half. So you can plug this in and get a huge boost for your defensive stats. And if you're in a daily change league, this is an awesome pickup. Now, Thybulle's only owned in 18% of Yahoo leagues right now as I'm recording this. And I read off who Philly plays, but if you look at it, they play 3 games in 4 nights. So they get Milwaukee, Memphis, Chicago to end the week. So he's widely available. If you're in a daily change league, you pick him up and plug in your defensive specialist at the end of the week. Get those blocks and steals boosted up and try and win those categories in your head-to-head matchup. Switching off of Philly, more offensive thing, another thing that was really hard to find on the waiver wire and is great if you can, is assists. So the New York Knicks get to play Cleveland and Atlanta, which you love those matchups. Detroit, you're not afraid of. And Orlando is the only down matchup. So they're playing 4 games, fairly well spread out, but they get that back-to-back over the weekend, which makes it a nice waiver pickup for daily change leagues too. But Elfrid Payton's only owned in 35% of Yahoo leagues. He's averaging 6 assists, and you're getting 6 assists off of the waiver. That's great. I really don't understand why he's so low, because I feel like most teams could plug him in, especially those where you need to play multiple guards and stuff like that. So that's my 4-game guard that I like. 3-game guard, which I don't always recommend playing a 3-guard, but Minnesota, they play Sacramento, Atlanta, and the Clippers. You like the Sac and the Atlanta matchup. The Clippers you don't love, but it's one of their back-to-backs, so maybe it'll be worthwhile anyway. Shabazz Napier, he's only 36% owned, and I'm kind of shocked. So if I use the 14-day averages from Yahoo, it makes him the 34th rated player in Yahoo's game. 8 categories, not including turnovers, because turnovers are stupid. So he's averaging a 3.5 a steal and a half. Really, it's 1.7 threes and 1.8 steals. 10 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 8 assists. He's only 36% owned. So there is a point guard, shooting guard eligible player on your waiver wire getting 8 assists over the last 2 weeks with over a steal and a half and a 3.5. This guy should be owned more, and he's not. So while he's only playing 3 games this week, I think he's still valuable for you. You plug him in, get 24 assists. That's going to be a big swing in most head-to-head matchups. And you probably want him for the rest of the season. Let me take a look. Minnesota doesn't have the amazing schedule. 3 now. They play 2 games each of the next 2 weeks, but those are lighter weeks anyway. So 2 is actually the high for most of those weeks, with the exception of Chicago has a weird 3-game week in that second, but that has nothing to do with this. But then Minnesota actually has a decent schedule for the rest of it. 4-4-3-4, 3-4, 3-4. So it's pretty good schedule. Go get Shabazz Napier right now. Almost any team can use him. Now, it depends on what you'd have to cut. But I feel like the market hasn't reacted properly to the trades, and this might be your last chance that you can go get him. Because if Minnesota's going out and playing Sacramento, Atlanta, and the Clippers, like, he could have a good week here with only 3 games, and I would want to lock him down if he's available in your league. Speaking of trades, the NBA's trade deadline is this week, in case anyone didn't realize it. So it's this Thursday. So maybe, I'm not saying you have to sit Derrick Rose if you're a Derrick Rose owner, but it might be worth kind of Googling and checking some of those trade rumors that are out there. There's a good chance Derrick Rose might get moved. Detroit's in a rebuild. Rose has some value if there's a contender that can make that deal, which means Detroit has 4 games. You play Derrick Rose. If you've got him, you play him. But you might lose some games in there if he ends up being on the move. Also along those lines, Reggie Jackson's available in, let me check this and get a live number right now. Reggie Jackson's owned in 39% of Yahoo leagues. So 60% of you could pick up Reggie Jackson. If Derrick Rose goes down, Reggie Jackson's usage could spike even higher. Right now he's at 22 minutes per game playing with Rose. If they deal the guard, there could be a good chance there. So go ahead and grab Reggie. He's lighting the world on fire. No, he's getting 2 threes a game, 13 points, 2 rebounds, 4 assists. It's not great, but you're going to get a lot of minutes played if that deal happens. And if you're not doing anything big, if you've got a spot, someone you can put in your injured spot and scoop someone up, let's go ahead and just grab Reggie Jackson. Otherwise, I'd look around the league for some other people you think might be on the move to either grab their backups to hope to stay ahead of the game a little bit. It all depends on what you're looking for in this league, but keep an eye on there. As I see stuff happening this week, I'm not as plugged in as actual NBA reporters, so I'll probably be more on the retweets. But if you want to follow me at B-Ball Analyzer, I'll try and be sharing out anything I see to help keep you guys abreast and jumping in and making those moves early. Beyond that, hope you're all doing well. That should get you ready for week 16. Go out there and win your week, and I'll talk to you guys soon.